Welcome to Live Vedanta, a podcast about simple living and high thinking. In this season of Live Vedanta, we are exploring the 70 essential verses of the Shrimad Bhagavad Gita. You can always go into our show notes to find a link to our last episode or scroll in your feed to access the full archive. But more importantly, we have a free ebook that accompanies Essential Love. And it includes accessible translations, reflection questions, and additional ways to learn and really internalize the key insights of what we are covering here. So I encourage you to check it out. Again, we have a link to that in our show notes. Okay, in verse 55 of chapter 2, Prince Arjuna asks about the experience of a still intellect. And Shri Krishna explains that it comes from fulfilling one's responsibilities with dedication. By renouncing all desires, the ego dissolves into the spirit, leading to contentment, completeness, and the experience of independent joy.
It is 55. I shall give you some context before I explain. At the end of chapter 1, at the beginning of chapter 2, Prince Arjuna declares, and Sanjaya verifies, that I will not speak anymore. Yet, Prince Arjuna is listening to that which is meaningful. He's not speaking, but he is listening. He's not listening to the conches or people's words. He's listening to that which is meaningful. When you listen to that which is meaningful, you feel more confident. For those in Bhagavata, our course, Rishi Shuka was a wanderer. But when they started to chant verses from Bhagavatam, he couldn't help but not wander. I think it's like the Pied Piper. That's what meaningfulness is. And so in verse 54, Prince Arjuna does speak. He says, how does one feel when they have stilled their intellect? A still intellect is when you are tuned into the only purpose is dharma. Ananya bhakti is dharma. You have different micro responsibilities, but they fuel or are infused into the macro responsibility. And Shri Krishna answers by sharing, they are joy. Verse 55. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Prajahati Yada Kaman Sarvan Partha Manogatan Atman Yevatmana Tushtaha Stita Prajnastadocchate. Joy times joy. What a verse. We are so fortunate to be able to experience what we are. Our Shri Krishna says, our Shri Krishna is saying, Yada, if this describes you, what? Kaman, sarvan, gatan. Kaman, desires. Which desires? Sarvan, all desires. Gatan, not the casual ones like I want to go tobogganing today, but those inner desires that the ego thrives on. If the desires, all desires, those rudimentary desires, they are renounced. There's a completeness that Shri Krishna is emphasizing. In the next line, tada. This is a if-then model. If this describes you, then Atmani eva atmana tushtaha The ego, when this is in the spirit, then one will feel tushta, complete. Desires come from prince, which comes from, or is an expression of, is a synonym of ego. This is the trajectory of the Bhagavad Gita, and it's very much connected to verse 11, where Shri Krishna shares, you are joy. And now in verse 55, this is a special section of 18 verses. He is sharing what joy looks like. In Bhagavad Gita's chapter 2, we explored verse 7. The key thought being, Prince Arjuna knows he needs to embrace discipline, and so claims himself to be a disciple. In verse 11, Shri Krishna begins to teach, begins to guide, begins to reveal, and he shares, those who are wise, they know they are joy. And the connection here is IQ is not equivalent to wisdom. SQ is equivalent to wisdom. Then in verse 47, Shri Krishna shares not to follow number 3. That is inaction. Not to follow number 2. That is results. But to follow number 1. That is action. When we follow the right actions, this becomes training in developing instrumentship. Instrumentship. This training goes on in the Bhagavad Gita and gets solidified, where Shri Krishna unambiguously shares, be my instrument. That comes many chapters later. From verse 47 to verse 55, Shri Krishna shares some carrots so that one follows. Number 1, that is the right actions, for karma yoga. He shares those who follow will become more balanced. Yoga samatva uchyate. They will become more capable. Yoga karmasu kaushalam. Shri Krishna introduces karma yoga, but he ends this chapter with jnana yoga. You should know you are joy. How does one know? What is the affirmation that I am joy? Shri Krishna shares, sthita prajna. The indications of one who feels that their joy, irrespective of context. All of us also feel we are joy, but it's context dependent. It's in meaningful mornings, correct? It's during the highest vocation. But asthita prajna, they're ones who are not context dependent. That's the 4th quarter. In the 3rd quarter, Shri Krishna shares, they are content dependent. The ego depends on the spirit. That makes one independent, independently joyous. Please reflect on that. If you depend on the context, you will become dependent. If you depend on the content, you become independent. In the 2nd quarter, Shri Krishna is sharing that the desires that we have are not casual, but we have serious desires. One who is realizing that they are joy, even the serious desires are dropped. In Sanskrit, the word for desire is eshana. this is an expression of what's deeper than that? Prince or vasanas. So when Shri Krishna shares one has dropped desire, that means they've also dropped the prince that is included in that. For those who are visualizing Pujaswami Chinmayananda's BMI chart, past the V or beyond the V is Om. I mentioned that to you earlier. The way to deal with conflict is to go beyond it. In the first quarter, Shri Krishna is sharing Prajahati. Jahati means to discard, to eject. Prajahati means completely. And another word for this is sannyasa. Sannyasa means to throw down fully. Shri Krishna's guidance in this final verse for us in this chapter, there is a significant difference. There's an exponential difference between being happy and being happiness. If I'm being happy, I still have desire. Sometimes overt, sometimes covert. But being happiness, one doesn't have desire anymore. Even mumukshutva, the desire for desirelessness, also has been completed. That is the sign of one who is wise. They are content. In this section, Shri Krishna shares many more beautiful insights, like a sign of one who knows that they are joy, Vita Raga Bhaya Krodha. They have done away with attachment, being attached, done away with being afraid, done away with being angry. Later on, Shri Krishna describes the ladder of fall. And the first way we start to fall or devolve is being distracted. When we look around, we start to compare, we start to compete, we just keep falling. Hence the message of unitasking. It's like if I'm careful on a ladder, the chances of me falling is very little then. Shri Krishna also shares a sign of one who is independent. The way dependent people live, he or she doesn't live like that. And he gives a beautiful contrast. When dependent people are awake, what does the independent person do? Sleeps. When the dependent people are sleeping, what does the independent person do? Gets up at 5:30 a.m. for the highest vocation. They're awake. Our lifestyle in a micro sense will describe that. So many people are joining Meaningful Mornings on Saturday morning during a winter storm. This is us imitating one who is wise. Fake it till you make it.